right, we are wrapping up the semester talking about the central control of our autonomic division of the nervous system. So, the autonomic nervous system is controlled or influenced by a lot of different areas of the brain: the cerebral cortex, hypothalamus, limbic system, medulla oblongata, and spinal cord. So, we're going to look into a bit more detail at some of these. So, the hypothalamus, this is going to control various things. It's in charge of a lot of our homeostasis mechanisms. So it's regulating primarily endocrine system function and autonomic division of the nervous system. So, for example, the optic nerve and pupillary response are going to be controlled by the hypothalamus. So there is a medial forebrain bundle that is made up of the olfactory cortex, basal nuclei, and amygdala. The outputs are going to go through two different tracks: the dorsal longitudinal fasciculus and the medial forebrain bundle. So input and output go through that medial forebrain bundle. So this is all going to help drive that pupillary reflex, so expanding or contracting the pupil in cases of increased light levels or decreased light levels. That's all being controlled through the hypothalamus. And so if there are higher levels of light, as if you walked outside on a bright sunny day, the hypothalamus is going to get the parasympathetic division to get the circular fibers in the iris to contract and constrict down the pupil so that there's less light coming through. Whereas, say, later in the day, you go out at dusk, it's a lot darker, so there's lower levels of light coming in on the retina. The hypothalamus is actually going to activate the sympathetic division, which is going to dilate the pupil, so the pupil is going to get larger, which will allow more light to come in and hit the retina, and then you're going to be able to see better. Got more light coming in, so it's a little easier to see in that case. Sometimes light is going to hit the retina in only one eye, but both pupils will contract in both of the eyes. And when that light gets removed from that single eye, pupils will both dilate again back to that resting position, right? So the stimulus is unilateral. It's given only to one eye on one side. The response is bilateral, though, so both eyes are affected. But this is only for autonomic response. This is not true for somatic reflexes. So this is why, again, with that withdrawal reflex, if you touch something hot with your right arm, you only pull back your right arm. You don't also pull back your left arm. So here is a graphic showing those fiber tracts. So the medial forebrain bundle is in orange right here. And then that dorsal longitudinal fasciculus is transitioning downwards down that spinal column. Now let's look a bit more at the amygdala and brainstem components of this control. So the amygdala is a group of nuclei in the more medial regions of the temporal lobe, and it is a part of the overall limbic system or limbic lobe, and it can actually influence the state of activity of the hypothalamus. So this is a really important area of the brain. So that amygdala is found right here in this kind of pale purple color, just to kind of give you a reference of where we're looking. All right. Here's hypothalamus is going to be right about in this area. So the amygdala is not too far away. So That limbic lobe, again, is going to have structures involved in emotional responses and memory formation and function. So the limbic lobe and amygdala ultimately can influence the hypothalamus based on the state of emotions at that particular point in time. So if you're anxious or scared, the amygdala will send signals out to the hypothalamus that stimulate that sympathetic fight or flight response. So that's why that fight or flight response is not only in cases of physical danger. It is because of how the brain is set up and how all of these pieces work together and are innervated and controlling each other, is why emotions can also activate that sympathetic response. Hypothalamus can also stimulate stress hormones to be released through the endocrine system because of what's being sent from the amygdala. This is another area of the brain, the amygdala specifically, that is actually the structure's a bit altered in people who have ADHD, because one of the key symptoms of ADHD is difficulties with regulating emotions. The amygdala is also impacted in things like autism as well, because all of those are going to have emotional regulation issues because of differences in structure of this particular portion of the brain. Next up is the medulla oblongata. This has a bunch of nuclei in it that are actually referred to as the cardiovascular center, and they are going to control the smooth and cardiac muscles of the cardiovascular system through the autonomic nervous system. So when homeostasis in the cardiovascular system gets thrown off, so if blood pressure changes, or you start working out or something and the heart rate's going to go up, the autonomic system is going to help coordinate through this region, through this cardiovascular center in the medulla oblongata. It's helping to control that response. So the sympathetic system can increase the activity of the cardiovascular system in response to anxiety or stress, either physical or emotional. So increase heart rate. This could increase blood pressure. And so there are preganglionic sympathetic fibers responsible for increasing heart rate. They're the cardiac accelerator nerves. Nice, clear name there. But there are preganglionic sympathetic fibers that are responsible for constricting blood vessels. That is the vasomotor nerves, and that makes sense because constricting blood vessels is going to increase blood pressure, and that's going to help make sure that blood gets to where it needs to be in times of stress. And then there are different parts of the brainstem, and there are nuclei within the brainstem that are really important for certain organ systems. So the solitary nucleus is also involved with cardiovascular function. It's picking up information about blood pressure and heart function from the glossopharyngeal and vagus nerves, and it will cause stimulation of the heart or blood vessels. So that can increase heart rate and blood pressure. So it's working with that medulla oblongata. The dorsal motor nucleus of the vagus nerve. This is the motor nucleus for the parasympathetic division of the nervous system that are connected to the vagus nerve, which, again, if you remember that graphic from a previous video, the vagus nerve goes to a lot of the organ systems in our body. So its motor nerve is controlling a significant portion of our organs within our body. So this can decrease heart rate, decrease blood pressure, relax the bronchial tubes in the lungs. That's going to make it a lot easier to breathe. It's going to activate digestive function, so get that digestive system working more. So that is all under control of that dorsal motor nucleus of the vagus nerve. And then we have the nucleus ambiguus. It is named for its ambiguous histology. So when we look at it under a microscope, there's nothing clear about it. So it's very ambiguous. And this is going to also help contribute to output through the vagus nerve. It also controls muscles in the pharynx and larynx for swallowing and speech. So I'm using that a lot right now to talk for recording this video. And it is also going to innervate the heart a little bit, so controlling heart innervation along with the dorsal motor nucleus of the vagus nerve. So just kind of coming back to that, again, here's our corpus callosum here in orange, that amygdala here in that pale purple. We have the hypothalamic nuclei right here where that hypothalamus would be. Hippocampus is also part of the limbic system. The cingulate gyrus is not something we've really gone into a lot in detail. This is another area of the brain that is impacted in ADHD for sure, and I believe autism as well. So there's a lot of different neurodevelopmental disorders that are directly impacting the structure and therefore function of these different areas of the brain. And that wraps up not just this video, but all of the lecture material for this semester.